Hi, everyone. Welcome to A Way of God's Remembrance with Michael Hayes. This is presented by Awake to Love. I'm Lee, the volunteer Zoom host, and so grateful that you are here. As a way of introduction, I will read Michael's words to bring clarity to the focus and the format of these weekly gatherings. This is a weekly gathering for those seeking greater awareness of their true nature. There are many paths and approaches to higher consciousness and to greater awakening to who we truly are. The essence, the truth of all these paths is more about remembering who we are and have always been, rather than becoming something different or more than we have seen ourselves to be. A way of God's remembrance goes to the heart, to the intention of all the paths. This is what we'll explore each week. Michael will share thoughts and awarenesses that come forward as relevant and purposeful for our time together, followed by questions and answers related to what he shares about. We will begin with an invocation of light to help support us all to be in collective alignment. And we would love for one of you participants to lead us in a light invocation. If you are so inspired, please would you raise your Zoom hand and Michael will select you. And after the light invocation, if you'd lead us in the chanting of 3 Anai hues. Anai hue, sacred tones, hue, ancient Sanskrit name for God. Anai, evoking the qualities of compassion, empathy, and oneness with God.
So just now, we call to God the Father in the essence of his dynamic and creative energy of beingness to bless us now, and that the light of the Holy Spirit and the light of the Christ and of the mystical traveler's preceptor consciousness through this energy filled, surround, fully protect us, and bring only that which is for the highest good of all concerned. We ask this light work with each person that's in this meeting, and that whatever negativity can be cleared in the greatest way at the highest right for the highest good, and be dissolved and taken back into the higher realms and dispersed into its nothingness, and fill all the places we cleared with light, love, upliftment, grace, balance, and health, and any other blessings that can come. And for this we give our thanks, and so it is.
Let's do the NIUs. Anai. Thank you, everyone, for being with us this evening and to share in a way of God's remembrance. Uh, it's a very special blessing to me to be able to share with you and to be part of this gathering. I'm going to ask for special light be sent to my stepmother-in-law, Betty Das, Alicia's mother, who is 95 and going to hospice. And if you could all lend your light to that, I'm appreciative. I've worked with a lot of people today, and a common thing I've watched and witnessed and been reminded of is that the challenges of our existence are not only there for us to overcome, but they're there in service to us. That in the divine design of our lives, we have been intimately involved in bringing forward a plan that the mystical traveler consciousness and the masters that oversee our progression diligent work to help us to fulfill. And within those plans that we've devised, there are challenges that we've set up. Those challenges have been set up, we could say, to balance out karma. Yes, but from a higher point of view, we'd say they've been set up to help us learn those things that our soul is still looking to learn. And so if we asked, we'd say, well, what is it the soul needs to learn? We could say, well, ultimately, the ultimate learning is that the soul learns how to be true to its own nature, be true to the divine nature, meaning to choose the loving, even in the midst of all the experiences and information the world throws forth, or that our own internal human consciousness throws forth, that push upon us to choose less than that loving. And so all the challenges of our life are a chance for us to choose and to choose a loving response, a loving expression, a loving willingness to go through that which is set before us. Now, given the challenges of this level and the challenges of many of the things we go through, it's not so much that in that process we never act or behave or express in a way that isn't what we would think of as loving. It's that even when we do that, we find loving to that part of our humanness that came forward to express in that less than loving manner, meaning we extend a forgiveness, which is really saying we extend the all loving nature of the divine, not simply to the world and to those things that are troubling to us in the world, but to the aspects of itself that are very much in the world and very much move and respond according to the conditioning, the programming, and the storyline of the world. And so another way of saying it is whatever we go through, we have a chance to forgive the judgment that we don't do it in a way that matches our ideals or our vision of how it ought to be done. So it calls on us to have that infinite compassion of spirit for all aspects of this creation, and that includes the aspects of this creation that we would include as part of our own domain. And if this was easy to do, we'd all be doing it very easily. It is truly a masterful task, and yet there's no other task we have here that is more in alignment with God's higher purpose for us and our own soulic purpose. And so forgiveness becomes this masterful treasure we have, that when we choose the forgiving, we choose to release ourselves from the confinement of the story of what's occurring in us, to us, through us, engaging in the world. The world is designed to entrap the consciousness, to seduce the consciousness, to entice us to act out in ways that are in alignment with the story of what the world says life's about. Because we carry humanness as soon as we enter the domains of time and space, and because we carry the limitations of physicality, the limitations of a body that naturally craves, emotions that want and long, a mind ceaselessly seeks understanding, seeks information. We're in a different dimension than what we came out of as the soul. We are strangers in this strange land. So the mastery of it is not getting it just right. The mastery of it is no matter what goes down, whatever occurs, we keep coming to the loving as a response to the world, but even more so response to our own participation in the world. There's a statement I learned first in the University of Santa Monica where it said, how you relate to the issue is the issue. And I've often heard it given to me a little differently in the spirit, where they say, how you relate the issue is the issue, which is sort of saying, oh, if I frame what's going on as something that shouldn't be, something that's bad or negative or evil or somehow contrary to God's purpose or God's will, I've bound myself to my misperception and to my misdefinition. When we look at this world and all the travails and all the different things that are easy for us to get upset about, we must always remember that God is allowing this. I mean, God's allowing it all. I mean, God's allowing us to come play in this incredibly complicated, growth-filled place. And since God's allowing it, then how could we be in judgment of it without being in judgment of God? So our learning of this, freeing ourselves from the judgment of how it's all going about, is a huge step in terms of coming back into the remembrance, coming back into the knowing that we are of God and that we've always been with God, even in the midst of participating in all this. The truth of us is right there with God in the highest of highs, living this while simultaneously living with God, learning this simultaneously for our own growth and our own advancement, but even more so for God's learning and for God's benefit, God's growth, if there is such a thing that God could grow, but God learning more about creating and what it'd be like if creation was this way. What a remarkable thing to know that God is learning through this experience, even as we are. And when we do what we would call make a big mistake, God learns through that too. So there's a saying that is no waste in spirit. And a way to understand that is to understand that no matter what goes on, God will find the learning. And since God's purpose is the learning, there is no waste. What a remarkable thing, what a remarkable experience God is having through us, with us, for us. the more we surrender to this truth, the realization that the blessings already are becomes present in us, not as a concept, not as a slogan, but as a truth that unwinds the distortions of this place from us. And we start to experience this peace that surpasses understanding. Each of us asked for the opportunity. Each of us received the grace of this opportunity, and each of us will fulfill it in the ultimate way, the same way, which is through the learning, through the growing, and principally through the learning to choose the loving. It is that loving that is the essence of all of this. When it's said in the Bible, God is love, it is not just a statement of hope coming from people that hope that God will be merciful and graceful and um, bring lots of rain for the harvest and keep the invaders away and um, help people live long, healthy lives. God is love is really an ultimate statement of the reality of God. And if you go into the highest of the highs, even above the 27 levels that have been described above the soul, that one truth is that God is love. And in that truth, there's this knowing that all that goes on is a product of love. And when we choose loving, we put that into action. The ing at the end of love means it's in action. We are then commutating into the lands of forgetfulness, this creation, the truth of God, the truth that God is always in, that God is always expressing and revealing. So our transformation is a transformation from the forgetting to the remembering. And that which is the source of all remembering is available to us always. There is a consciousness extended into creation in service to the greater purpose of God, which is always in that remembrance. And it extends into all aspects, dimensions of what we would know as creation, and even that which is beyond this creation, but still has differentiation. And it is always there, holding keys and opportunity of remembrance. And it offers all that to us always. And when we come awake into the truth of ourselves in remembrance, we come into a oneness with that which is offering the remembrance. And the more we come into that remembrance, the more we serve with that which holds for all remembrance. And that holds for all remembrance, we often call the traveler consciousness. But it's called many things in many dimensions. It doesn't really matter what it's called. It's what it does. It is that which always knows and remembers everything back towards God. And those places and consciousness that are in the forgetfulness, it's calling to each consciousness. And at some point in every soul's progression, that call is heard. There is a response, a flicker of awareness. And then that journey into remembrance begins. Hence, it's called the traveler consciousness, because it is the facilitator of that remembrance, that movement from the forgetting to the remembering. It's also understood and it's operating in terms of the time-space model of realms and levels and differentiation and our consciousness coming into remembrance of the different facets of differentiation of God's manifestation, whether called realms or dimensions or levels. Inevitably, all of us will be in remembrance of all of it, because that is what God has ordained, that all of itself shall come back into the remembrance of itself. That time for each of us is something that is ultimately determined in God. The main thing we do is make ourselves willing, cooperative, and we come into the allowance. We could sort of say we do our part. There's an old saying, it says, work like it's all up to you, pray like it's all up to God. The hardest part is actually the praying like it's all up to God. Because if it's truly all up to God, then we would really let go and let God. So let's all do that. In this moment, let's just breathe in and just give it up to God. God, I surrender it all to you, knowing that it's all yours and has always been yours. And that our lives, our journey, are also part of you and part of your purpose. And in this, we allow your will to be done in us, through us, and for us. And we allow you to free us from this illusion of separate self. Free us from the illusion of individuation. Free us from the pull and the confinement that we subject ourselves to because of our story of limitation, our story of self. And with the story of self, our story of selfishness. Your call to us activates an answer from within us, from that part of us that is you, that is always you. And this then is the divine communion of the us that is always with you, with the us that's lost in the pretense of being apart from you. We do receive, and we also give of our willingness, our readiness, our participation. We are yours, Lord. Amen. Very special. You don't need to come out of the space you're in. I'm going to turn it over to Lee, who's going to share a few things. After he shares them, we're going to do some question and answers related to what we've talked about. And bless you all.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for your sharing. Your sharings for me are so understandable and activatable, and I am so grateful. Now, guidelines for asking questions of Michael. Questions are to be about a way of God's remembrance and what Michael has shared. If you'd like to ask a question, please raise your Zoom hand. You can find that by hovering near the bottom of your Zoom screen. Click on the react icon. A pop-up appears, and then you choose raise hand. We ask, if you are wanting to ask a question, that you also turn on your video for full participation. If you're on a low bandwidth connection and are not able to do that, so be it. Most importantly, since so many of us have had the blessing over so many years to have so many things cleared by working with Michael, this is not that. Please don't ask questions of a personal nature, and don't ask Michael to assist with clearing. Questions are to be for your benefit, for the benefit of those of us gathered and those who will participate via the replays. We ask that you look to the integrity of your intentions before asking a question of Michael. And thank you for your cooperation. Finally, the legal consent. By raising your hand and asking questions of Michael, you are giving full consent to Awake to Love to make the audio and video of this gathering, including your sharing, available as online archives for anyone to access. Please do not raise your hand and do not share unless you are in full agreement. Thank you. Michael, many, many hands are there.
Let's do, let's do Juliana Rose.
Okay, Juliana, please, if you'd unmute, and if you're able, start your video.
Unmute, start video. Okay, having a bad hair day, nonetheless, loving myself. First of all, thank you, Michael. This was really, it was very deep for me, in a way of looking, what am I doing to separate myself from everything you just shared. One of the things that really, really is challenging for me in the world is, how do I stay connected to love and light and seeing myself as the spark of God, the belonging of the whole of everything, with everything that's going on in the world, most especially right now. I think this is the most challenging time to stay neutral at the minimum, and in the loving at the most balanced, with what's going on in the world theater right now.
Well, first of all, let's remember that everything that's going on, God is allowing. So God is letting this thing play out. Is this the most challenging time? Who's to really say? We certainly have more information about all these different things. I mean, Gaza, boy, that's a horrific situation. There's 37,000 civilians killed. That's pretty terrible. Genghis Khan is believed to be killed, slaughtered between 40 and 60 million people. So that's a pretty bad time. In the
Yeah.
Black Death, when the Black Death moved through Europe and killed more than a third of all the people in Europe, that was a pretty bad time. And when the Great Flood happened, Atlantis and the world was covered with water. About 98% of the people in the world died. That's a pretty bad time.
Mm.
And God allowed all these things. So when we cling to our human perspective and let it run us, regardless of how something is going on, we are then subjecting ourselves to the world and the world's way. Christ Jesus set us this extraordinary example when on the cross, he said, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. Meaning he was holding to the higher perspective and that loving even in the midst of a personal crucifixion, which was an extraordinary example to us. Fortunately, most of us don't have to go through that kind of trial and tribulation. You're righteous in your consciousness related to a lot of things, and the right wrong model, which is very much the model of law, the model of karmic law, plays out in all of us to some degree. But in your consciousness, it's very pronounced in terms of the things in the world that you see as so negative. I don't disagree with you in my own mind. I look at them and I go, wow, we really like it to be different than that. But a lot of what's going on is the working of karma. And since this planet has been under the eye for an eye of karma for a very long time, since even before the dinosaurs, and only recently, in the last, let's say in the last 12,000 years, it started to change, but really 2,000 years ago, with the coming of Jesus, was the evidence of this other way of doing it really made available to mankind, which was the karma could be worked instead of under law, under grace. And under grace, the emphasis of an eye for an eye could be set aside. And that it would be set aside then when learning was being demonstrated. And the learning then would allow for grace and forgiveness because God's purpose in creating all this was learning, that God would learn and those components of God that were individuated would learn, and that learning would translate back into God. So this is, in a sense, creation where God was experiencing as a creator, like having an experiment, see what it would be like if reality was like this, what would it be like? So the righteousness says, no, 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 but it's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong. And there's no way I can accept that that's how it is. Well, that place that does that is directly under the negative power. That part that stands for the insisting on the wrongness of all these things would hold the world under an eye for an eye. And if one condemns the eye for an eye, then one condemns the creator of all that, which was God. So God isn't looking at it the way you are. When you look at it from spirit, it's incredibly different. I can remember when I was, it was probably about 27 years ago, because I remember I was just in relationship with my wife and she went into a bank to do something. And I remember exactly where the bank was, and down near the ocean on Wilshire. And I'm sitting in the car, and suddenly the spirit came to me and said, how would you like to see the world the way the masters see it? And I said, well, sure. And so they pulled me up into this consciousness, and I was looking at this world as it's seen from the eyes of the masters. And it was just extraordinary because they had so much loving for it and so much acceptance for it. There was no judgment in them about any of it. They were looking at how beautifully it was set up to the learning and how that their purpose was to augment that learning, and they would come into creation and serve to help shift the consciousness of the people into a consciousness that was more ready to learn, more receptive to the learning, and more able to give other people the space to learn. It was an amazing thing. They just were loving it all.
Mm.
They had no judgment of it, no condemnation of it. And when we come into that truth of ourselves, we will love it the same way. But if we cling to the resentment and the judging, we will deny ourselves the opportunity to be in the fullness of who we truly are. And one of the main things that keeps people reincarnating is that very thing. Their judgment of something about this reality or something about their own participation in the reality. In the end, it all must be let go. Because if you want God consciousness, if you want to do the spiritual law of assumption, which says if you want God consciousness, you must assume it. You assume God consciousness by surrendering to the truth of how God sees reality and participates in reality. And when you do that, nothing is left but the loving.
Hmm.
This thing we're talking about is sets you back in a number of lifetimes. You could have come awakened about 5 lifetimes ago, but you got caught in some real righteousness there. You're still just kind of kicking this can down the road. You could kick it down in the next life if you want. Or you could surrender to the wisdom of God and the perfect loving of God and say, I may not understand it, God, but I love you and I know you love me. And that will be the prime directive of all my existence, to that remembrance of your love for me and my love for you. And I will make my participation in this world a demonstration of that loving and a reflection of that loving. And whatever else goes on, I leave that in your hands. And as you do that, the kingdom of heaven will be at hand, and you will know the blessings already are. And that God is not only in charge, but God's will is done.
Amen.
All right. Bless you, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, gosh. A lot of hands here. Um, Debbie Roth.
Hi, Michael. Hi, everybody. It's Debbie. And there you go. Now I see you. The question that I have that came to my heart is around forgiveness. What you shared about us learning how to love different aspects of our own consciousness as well as things on the outside, to me is so Christed. And you know how JR says it's like Christ is forgiveness. And if you could speak more to that and about, without getting into the mind and the how-tos, I don't want to get into that here, but light for the highest good, it's like the surrendering process to like understanding that all we need to do, or I'll say me, but I'm going to make it about everybody, like all that we need to do is show up and have our willingness and intention to forgive and know that like the Christ takes that into the perfection. So that's really the question that came to my heart. And I heard inwardly that if you did call on me, that the words of forgiveness or a song of love. So I just wanted to say that too, as a gift of the Christ consciousness in my own heart. And God bless you, Michael, and your ministry to all of us with these calls. Thanks.
Well, thank you for your question. The one of the key things to the Christ consciousness that people miss is that it is all forgiven already. we're just bringing ourselves in alignment with that truth. The idea that Jesus came and took the sins of the world to himself is really true on a higher level of understanding. But that doesn't mean we have all come into a willingness to cooperate with that. And it's not enough to say, oh, I love you, Jesus, and I go to church or I pray or I tithe or anything I do. It's like, it's just, it's really letting it go. The forgiving is forgetting. And it's like, in a strange way, if you take those words, forgiving is forgetting. It's by giving, we get. See, by giving, we get. See, if the kingdom of heaven is at hand and the blessings already are, then it's all done. It's all forgiven. But in the world of appearance, the world of distortion, still gives us this opportunity to play in the separation and play in the limitation and play in the lack and play in what's wrong and right and play that game. It's almost if you go to the Garden of Eden and the whole idea of the metaphorical story of that, so then Eve takes of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, tree of knowledge, which is duality, and partakes, is tempted into partaking, I mean, leaving that state of it's all done, it's all complete, choosing into that, choosing into the duality. Well, we chose in, we can choose out. Now, once we get into the duality, it tries to hold on to each consciousness by reinforcing the perception that the world of duality is reality. In the highest realms of spirit, looking into all this, it's not just, did you know it's illusion in those higher realities, this isn't even known or noticed. Because it's just another part of it's just another distortion, which goes with creating. When God created all this out of the totality of itself, God was just pure. In the ultimate God is just this pure potential of creativity. And then God lays out all the issuances of reality. And then engages itself into what it's created to understand what that is. God has never stopped being God, and no part of God has ever stopped being God. But parts of God are engaged in a pretense of differentiation, separation, and all the different things that go with that. And so God, that's why God is allowing it all. Because God is the creator, the promoter, and the allower. Created this extraordinary universe of reality, of universes, of levels, and all these different things. You promote parts of itself. Hey, I got this great thing for you to go try. And then God allows it to play out. The ultimate salesman, getting it parts of itself to play in the game of forgetting of itself. And Christ is just this expedited way of coming into the learning of what's going on. And while we are dealing in the time and space experience, and thus we're dealing with cause and effect and dealing with karma, which is the byproduct of the cause and effect. There is learning we will do as individuals And some of it was just learning about, oh, this is the effect of that cause. So there's a lot of that is what we do. But somewhere in there, there's this learning that we start to learn, oh, for so many lifetimes, I just felt like I was at the effect. Now I suddenly realize I'm really cause. I'm experiencing the effect, but I'm really cause. And so we wise up as individuals and become wiser in our choices in the way we create. Now the whole model of getting off the wheel of incarnation is a model that says become wiser and better people so that you create better karma so your life gets better and eventually you will get to God if you in a sense complete all your karma. But creating karma is a little bit like trying to clean up a huge oil spill in the middle of an oil spill. Every step you take, you're tracking more oil somewhere. And so just trying to master everything from that level of doing better is ridiculously difficult. Now, the Luciferian plan suggests that should be the way we should do it. But Christ offers us the greater truth. Start to know reality and see reality as God has laid it out. And know that if we can engage with this reality with that loving consciousness and that willingness to address each person, each situation as best we can in loving, it will rapidly change and complete and clean up those karmas. So the Christ opportunity in this world is really about that expediting or completion of the learning. We sometimes glamorize it in terms of it takes this great change in us. Without realizing it, we're just pushing the Christ opportunity into the same great path of becoming that was being sold to people on this planet and throughout the cosmos for eons of time. And somehow you just keep becoming life and life, and not quite. Oh, next time. And it just seems to go on and on and on. What really happens, you come to this point of realization that of myself, I can do nothing. Of myself, I cannot be good enough. I cannot be perfect enough. I cannot be the fulfilling of an ideal of something that is totally non-reactive to anything negative and totally loving and never makes a mistake. And that whole thing, when you really realize that, the game starts to collapse. And in that moment, you are really ready for the remembrance. And the Christ then is the rapid way to come to that remembrance. And the greater key of that remembrance is extended to us very efficaciously and very directly through Christ. But that holds that key and extends that key through the Christ is what we call the traveler consciousness. And so that's why they work synonymously. Could it be done without the Christ? Theoretically. But really, really, really hard. You've made it hard on yourself because of exactitude, which is the old eye for an eye. But see, that was cultivated in many lives, in you and many of us, because that made us better at creating what we call good karma, kind we like, versus the bad karma, the part we don't want. We don't want to suffer. And yet that's still good karma, bad karma, it's still karma. The game we want to play is the no karma game.
Mm.
And the no karma game is available through the Christ. You can't understand this fully. You can know it fully. And as you know it, the understanding will come forth. That's not just for you, that's for every consciousness. But that you love and serve is loving and serving you by extending the truth to you all the time. So that old admonition, Father, I receive, is a great prayer. Jared has an interesting statement where he says the only grace is loving God. Oh, loving God. Well, what's God? Well, there's nothing that isn't God. So it's really the only grace is loving it all. Oh, I hope that helps. Bless you.
Bless you. Thank you. Love you.
I love it too. Denise.
I had a feeling. I don't know if I can word it, but as we're all aging, and I'm looking at our group of people who've been studying for a long time, it's how to handle the remembrance and being on this earth and the perceptual dissonance that happens. And sometimes even the thing of like, what am I to do might be something that people fall into, but it's sort of just like, how do you make, because I know that there's more and more of the letting go and less of the karma, less and less of what it is that, there's no more like pull to do this or that or whatever, but not only how to manage, but how to move that perception to a flow. Am I making any sense at all? It's like how to manage the multidimensional in a way.
You don't manage the multidimensional.
Yeah, that makes
Well,
sense.
That's still part of the control approach. And that's part of I doing it. And that's still part of the great path of becoming. Like I'll become more able to manage the multidimensionality of it. You surrender to the truth, and the truth will live through every dimension of you. That is the God in all of us will live through all of us. See, that part of this that wants to have control of it wants it to be effortless and easy. But we're going to deal with resistance in the part of us that's been in this game for so many eons. It will cling to its storyline. It will move to its own sustainability. Because, to it, all of this is all there is. But in the truth of yourself, you realize all of this and all that this has is ultimately an illusion. It's a transitory, temporary condition, like being in a movie theater and watching a movie. You say, but I love Lord of the Rings, so I want to stay in it forever. And I go, well, that's not what this is. There is forever, but it's a different kingdom. And the Lord of that kingdom is a lot nicer than the Lord of the Rings.
Hmm.
So as you open in consciousness, there will be a when a strange thing will happen inside, you will go from looking for God and it'll flip inside and you'll be God looking. And you'll know this reality as God knows it. You'll be addressing and seeing this reality as it's known from the truth of you, the source of you, the oneness of you, and the oneness of all of us. And everyone who really comes into this describes it in somewhat similar ways. That's what all the Rumis and the poets and the masters, and they're constantly offering us this profound truth that if we really embrace that profound truth, we would see all of this differently. So it's about changing the perception. Approach it like that and don't worry about the rest. Part of the whole worry thing is part of the game that holds you here. She just, well, if I could just solve it to the satisfaction of my mind, my ego, then I wouldn't have any, I wouldn't worry and I'd be in bliss. No, the mind and the ego would just find something else to worry about. That's what they do. To sustain themselves, they would continue that process. All right, bless you, my friend. Thank you. Lori.
Hi, thank you, Michael, for calling on me. I read the Honora Cigar, and it, you know, it talks about the negative force and how all its little tricks to keep us on this planet.
Mhm.
And I don't know, this may be oversimplified, but it's kind of like a game I start playing with myself. It's like anything that isn't loving for myself or another person is a negative force trying to influence me.
Well,
So
okay. Mm.
I don't know. I just thought maybe you may want to just talk
I would,
about that.
I
And
would, I would talk about it like this. Mm. Anything that isn't loving for yourself or for others or for the world that you're engaged with is a potential engagement with negativity. Now we have bodies here, so we're engaged in negativity, or another way of saying is we're engaged in the magnetism of this. The magnetic light is a magnetic light. And that doesn't mean it's all bad. It just means it's something that um, we can have an effect upon, and it can have an effect upon us. Meaning we can will things, we can try and make things happen. We could send out a curse, and the magnetism will respond and bring that into being. The non-magnetic, that which is from the soul realm and above, uh, doesn't deal in any of that. We don't have control of that. We can't. And so the goal of just trying to be loving in every way, I go, yeah, that's the only thing that the negative power can't really control here or get into. It's another way of saying getting into it. It doesn't deal in that because the loving is the non-magnetic. So the part of us that is truly loving is the soul, non-magnetic. What we often call love is an intermixture maybe of the soul's loving and our own desires, our own appetites, our own uh, our own ambitions and desires, our own wants. So if you hold the only loving thing in your consciousness, that could be a neat goal, but understand the challenges of that. Because as long as you have the body, you have all these other chakras. And another way of saying it is you have all these dimensions in you that are geared differently. They're geared to take, they're geared to participate in the world in an exchange process. They're geared to the exchange of things. So, the give and take of life. God only gives because God is only giving, because God is loving. You say, well, then I'll only be giving. Well, but you also got give to whom? You only give. Say, well, I'll only give love to all the other souls. Well, that's great. Send them the light. You just did it. Well, I'll feed the homeless. I'll do that. So you're giving the loving. You're doing love, activating loving to a part of to the magnetism to part of it. That's great because you're extending the loving. But the magnetism will attempt to prevail upon our consciousness, and it is drawn to the light and to the non-magnetic to try and, in a sense, co-opt it and possess it. And why does the negative power want to hold the souls in here? Because the souls bring the non-magnetic into this. And this doesn't have the non-magnetic in itself in the same way. Ultimately, it's part of spirit, but it doesn't have the particularization of the non-magnetic, which is the soul. And so holding the souls into all this is like a prized possession to negativity. And yet that serves the greater purpose of God. Because then it becomes a catalyst to the learning, a catalyst of what the soul is about, what the soul is learning. So for yourself, be gentle with yourself. As much as we want to be loving, our minds are going to do what they do. They go here and there, to and fro with thinking and with design. And the impulses of the world around us we pick up. I mean, the mind is often a receptor of many messages. We go on a computer and it's not just what we think we're getting, there's subliminal messaging. There's radio waves, there's all these things. And so we're like a receiving device to all these different inputs. Rather than trying to eliminate the input of the things that would resonate with the lesser chakras, the lower chakras, let's just enhance our receptivity to the receptivity of our higher chakras, the third eye and the crown and above. And so that those become so enhanced and so available to us, both as an energy source, but as an information source, that we can always have that viewpoint available to us that will counteract whatever comes to us and into the lower nature of ourselves and give us an offsetting perspective that helps us to not be trapped in the lower dimension and controlled by it. Thus, we are in it, but not of it. We're in the lower dimensions because we have this form, but we're not of it, meaning we don't allow it to control us. Or when and if we do, we just bring the forgiveness into that judgment and say, oh, right, I'm still working on that. Next. We have a goal. Our goal is to be loving. Our goal is to be one with that which is love, which is God. So we want the spiritual law of assumption, which says if you want God conscious, you must assume it. Assume as you mean. Oh. But if we just do it in kind of a behavioral model, which is what the religions were really trying to get people to do, it's a very Christian model. Or even the Jains in India or some, do no violence to any living thing. Well, it's pretty hard to do that while you're in a physical form.
No, I don't think I can do that.
Good.
What I was looking at is if something comes in that's a negative thought or a negative feeling, I just think I don't give it energy. Or I tell myself it's not worth giving energy to.
I think
because
that's
it's
really
not.
wise. I think that's really wise. And what you can look to in your own progression is there something else that's come in that's affecting me that's allowing that thought process to kind of run in my consciousness. Because that's the subtler game we play with negativity, where it finds ways to get ourselves to be accepting and cooperating with its intention, which is the negative. And therefore we go, if I'm creating, promoting, allowing, Jared teaches us, we either create, promote, or allow everything that happens to us. Well, if we're allowing this, why? And if so, how do I change that? How do I disallow? And that right there, people ever were wondering, is to me is the whole basis of the whole idea of clearing. Clearing is not so much to change our world and make everything the way we want it. Changing is to preserve the integrity and the purity of our relationship with God. There's a statement in the Bible that says, I shall dwell in the house of the Lord all my days. I'm going to dwell in the house of the Lord. Well, I don't want to keep, stepping out of the house of the Lord because this pulled me out or that pulled me out. So what I'm looking at is, what are the things that I carry within my consciousness that make me susceptible to being lured away from the house of the Lord?
I get it.
Yeah, because framing it the way you did is idealistically makes all the sense in the world, but for thousands of years, so many devout Christians and devout Muslims and devout Hindus and devout everyone was kind of trying to do that behavioral perfectionism, not just behavior of what I do with my body, but with my thoughts and my feelings, like to keep it pure. So you don't have to give up all of that as a goal, but what you do is you realize, oh, and when something starts to go there, rightfully, like you said, I won't put energy into it, but also can look at, why was that allowed to come through? And then it'll lead you to a potential opening, which will inevitably be some form of attachment to the magnetic nature of reality. And you clear it or you let it go. And that makes you that much more available to the non-magnetic. And that way, every knock, which is like a knock when they're trying to, or stumbling block that's thrown your way by negativity, becomes your stepping stone, because the only way it can do that is to come through some opening you're giving it, and then you see that, catch onto that opening, and in catching onto the opening, you close the opening. And the more you free yourself of the openings you have to the magnetism of creation, the more fully you can live in the non-magnetic nature of reality. We tend to think of like the magnetic level as down here and the non-magnetic is up here, but the reality is that's just a spatial model. But you go beyond the spatial model, you could say the non-magnetic is entirely present and the magnetic is present in a sense, right in the same place. Oh, so I choose the non-magnetic reality and living in that and the knowing of that. And the more I am freed from or undone from the magnetic story, what's left is the non-magnetic. I don't have to go chase the non-magnetic or seek it or do some extraordinary feat to make it come present. It's always entirely present. The blessings already are. It's just freeing ourselves from that which would distract us. Bless you, my friend, and thank you.
Yeah, let's see. Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome. I don't know how we're doing with
Michael,
time.
we are way over, about 15 minutes over our intended completion.
Oh, my goodness, I didn't know that. Well, let's seal it up then. We'll say a little prayer, and thank you, dear Lord, for this opportunity to participate with one another in loving and to support each other in this awakening into this that is the God of all our hearts, the truth of all reality, and is the way of God's remembrance. We do thank you, Father, for your goodness, your love, and support. We ask that your blessings go with each person participating on this call and on this planet. That every day in every way, each conscience becomes more and more available to this grace that you are constantly extending to us and continuously inviting us to partake of. Help us all to partake and help us help each other to do so as well. Bless us all, and God bless. Amen. Baruch Bashan.
God bless you, Michael.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Michael.
Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Michael,
God bless you.
God bless
Michael.
you.
Michael.
Gracias so
Michael.
much, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Love
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
Michael. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Bless you. Bye.
Bless you all. Love you all.
Thank you. Love
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 you.
you,
you.
Michael.
Thank you all for participating.
Love you, Michael.
Bless you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Ciao. Thank you. God bless you, Michael.
Bless you all. Bye.
Michael.